The day before yesterday, I released our first interview, the first episode, and it was watched
Mhm.
by about 9,000 people in Russia already. So the reason I talk about it is because there was a comment there. One person was shocked about you being at Camp Hero for 44 years, it appears. So I guess we could start, shortly with the way it worked with time there. Did you, first of all, can you say what year you were born, or maybe what year you were taken to the programs, just for the people to understand?
Sure. So I was born in 1988.
Okay.
That's the year I was actually when I was taken to the program. Though, so like I said before, the way that the time distortion worked there, um, I think I might have made a mistake and said that it was like 3 years there was a year here, but I think it's the other way. It was 3 years here was a year there. So
Oh, okay.
whatever time frame it would be here would have been so time was slower there than it was here, you know.
Mhm.
So be like 3 years would go by here, it'd be a year there. That's about the way that I think that it works from what I've gathered so far.
I know you have been in many programs, so I guess it's hard to say when you were taken, probably from the very early age to
So
any of the
nor
programs.
normally from what I've gathered from like just between recall and you know understanding other people that I know that were in the programs and what they've recalled because it's like we're all piecing things together,
Mhm.
it's like a jigsaw puzzle, or just a puzzle in general, every piece counts, you know what I mean? But from what I can gather, normally people were within the age range of 7 or 8. Some programs took you earlier than that, um, but there was a lot of cloning, or it just depended on what faction you're with. Because I know like Knockwalp predominantly uses your actual body,
Mhm.
and they normally take you. I think they normally took us around the age of 7 or 8, um, to a lot of these programs. So they would grab you at one point. So it's like, from what I remember, from the first memories I got when I got taken by like 3 different craft, but it was on the same day. So like they grab you, take you, bring you back in time to where they got you, and put you right back. Like sometimes if they put you back, you'll be in an altered mind state, so you'll be kind of blacked out, and then you'll just come to like nothing happened. So you can lose, like 8 or 9 minutes of time in the here and now, but not realize that you lost those minutes. You just
Okay.
be
Yeah.
standing there, or think you're standing there.
It's
Um,
interesting because a lot of people report that they would be taken at any age or any time, even in the here and now, they would be taken several times a night, which is and by sometimes by different groups, right? Do you think there is a specific moment that they have to take you because there's some kind of a window or something? Because, Penny reported that, many others told me that the same thing. And now you're saying you were taken by three different crafts in the same night, which is crazy because, like,
well,
if I was running this operation, I would probably want to distance myself from, time wise from others so I get work comfortably, but they still did it. So
yeah, so the way that I remember it being, it was in nighttime, it was daytime, but I lived out in the desert, so I lived in Sky Valley at the time, and I
okay.
lived on like six, I think it was like six something acres for the property, but it was like nobody really. It was, you had people that lived in the area, but normally it wasn't busy. Like people weren't always
Yeah.
standing around outside, So if you live in a less uh,
In
overpopulated
in
area,
the countryside, yes.
in the countryside, it's a lot
Yes.
easier to get you whatever they want. And
Hmm.
yes, they do have cloaking, so they can come in and stop, drop their ship, and then like they have cloaking devices on their that they can carry, handheld cloaking devices. They're not, some of them are not as compact. It just depends on what faction and program you have and who they're working with
Okay.
technology wise. With me, it was like I had one craft come in and grab me, and then once they brought me back, they had left, and then another craft came in like seconds after they did.
Oh my God.
So trust me, it freaked me out. Like by the time the third craft had left, it like I was just tired of it. I just was done with it, you know. I tried to run. I literally ran inside and tried to hide, you
What
know.
happens to what happens to you physically? Do you realize it because do you remember it, or you just realize that something happened just now and
Oh
you
no,
know?
like what? So it's like when I got taken by those three craft, I remember it. It was real time.
Okay,
Um, I remember when I went outside because I've talked about it in my original interviews. So like I had walked outside, I had you know for some reason I just had this feeling that I just wanted to leave the planet and I didn't want to be here, and I knew that I was playing a game. It was a Sims game,
okay,
and I had watched. What was weird is like I had watched an alien craft on the game fly over, pick up the sim because there's specific stuff you do that causes that to happen in the game, right? And
hmm
that's Sims 1. And after I had saw that, for some reason I just got this feeling to go outside. And I ended up going outside. I closed my eyes, and I wanted to fly originally. That's what I wanted to do. I just wanted to fly and I wanted to get off the planet, and
some kind of mind control
yeah, it
resonator.
was yeah, it was like some kind of, feeling that I got. I don't know if it was a specific alter giving me those emotions because I know that they can do stuff like that.
Hmm
They can basically press their emotions onto you, onto your
Okay,
thoughts.
wow.
And this is just stuff that I've learned now versus beforehand. Um, I remember that like it happened, like I had gotten taken. I know the faction that took me, and then when I got brought back, I was hovering. Like they had this, the word for it. It's like a tractor beam
Tractor
on
beam,
me.
yeah.
They were like placing me back, and I had woken up and I was still like above the trailer. So like if you think about a trailer being level on the ground and at the top of the
hmm
roof, I was like basically where at roof level. I had sat there and started freaking out because I was hovering in the air, and I had thought at that moment that I was actually flying. So I started
Okay,
moving around and like freaking out, because I'm normally afraid of heights, you know.
okay,
So like especially after that, I made me really afraid of heights. But I ended up freaking out, and then they couldn't keep me in this beam. Like it had let go and I had fallen, and I remember hitting the ground on the back of the balls of my feet, which shot pain up the back of my calves, and then I fell back and I hit my tailbone, and I had put my
oh,
hands back to try to catch myself. And I remember like I lived in the desert, so I ended up like scratching my hands up, like if you slide through dirt, little rocks and stuff like that. So that had happened, and it was like I could feel pain in my back and my the balls of my feet and my hands. I had lifted them up, and like when they first get cut open, you can start feeling it, right? And I started feeling it, and I started like cleaning my hands, and then I sensed, which normally never happened to me before. I had sensed this weird feeling that something was watching me, and it was right here towards this area. It was like up in the sky. It was further up than the place I was staying in, the trailer I was living in, and I had looked up like this, and I saw this craft is hovering there, and I felt like emotions of, oh shit, because normally when they put you back, you're not supposed to remember or see them.
okay.
And I remember crying and begging them just to leave me alone. And I remember telling them that I would never say anything whatsoever to anybody. I was like, I'll never say anything. I'll keep my mouth shut. Just please leave me alone. And after a few moments, whoever was in the craft gave it a few moments and thought about it. I could sense that they were thinking about it. I could sense specifically what they were thinking. But they ended up deciding just to leave. And I
Okay.
remember just like, slowly going up into the sky. It hit, close to where about under the clouds, and then shot off and disappeared like just in a blink of an eye. Just was like gone. Um,
So you were actually asking them not to mess with you further
yeah,
because
like
because
in
you
my
remembered because you saw them, you basically,
yeah, and
they got
the
made.
first Yeah, the first time I came out publicly, I even admitted that. Like, I never spoke about it to anybody. I never told my mom or anyone, you know. Um,
So
and
that was
even
when
before that,
that
I
was
remembered stuff, but I remember the stuff that I was getting, where like they couldn't keep me from remembering things. It was never really a lot based around aliens per se. Like, I remember seeing some some reptilians when I was younger in school when they were doing their programming process for me. But it was like when it came to the point where craft was involved, that I was around the age of, I think I was like 12, give or take,
Hmm.
when that happened. And I
Okay.
remember after they had left, I another group had come in and they ended up getting me, and then they had left, and then another group had come in, and I could sense the emotions from each group, like whoever was in the craft or even the ship, like the larger ship, I could sense their feelings if it was positive or negative, or just in between,
Okay.
you know.
Right.
So that
Yeah.
changed for me. And then like so the day I ran inside and I hid under my covers after the third craft, and I ended up like being scared to the point I just passed out finally, and I ended up remember waking up at night. I remember seeing flashing lights outside of the trailer, but I don't know. I'd assume that there was a craft there or something like that, but I just remember trying to pray and stuff like that, because my family was really religious, back then, they were into a lot of religion. I used to go to church and things like that. And I also remember like going out the next day and getting picked up by a different craft, so they did it within the same time frame,
Okay.
within a week. I do remember getting picked up by at least four craft, and then like I remember having altar bleed through and like hearing voices talk to me in my head that were my altars that I finally, now I know what they were, but they freaked me the hell out. Um,
Wow. So that was at the age of 12 that you had this experience. I see.
yeah.
So
Sorry. So yeah, so like when I was around 8, I remember like a lot of, when I was being taken out of class and stuff like that,
okay.
how they were doing some of the programming and things like that. But I do remember like I said, seeing reptilians, like there was three of them, and it was like in this kind of makeshift church because of the school I went to at the time, so
Wow.
there was a lot of things dealing with that and how they were programming kids, finding kids who had psychic abilities versus not. And even though that group didn't really care, if you had psychic abilities per se, because they would still, if they needed to, they would sacrifice you and eat you, because at that time, knowing what I know now versus then, there were a ton of us back then when with what I did remember, there was so few of us. I just was like, I just tried to let it go and bury it in the back of my mind and just never speak about it.
Mhm. So they were doing this in your community, actually.
Yes, they were doing it specifically with the school I was going in, which was the Seventh Day Adventist Academy. That was in a different vicinity from where I lived because I lived far away. Um,
Hmm.
but you can find that location, with a Google search.
Yeah.
And there's been
In
interviews where I've shown.
in the
So
light of day, they were doing this like in the middle of the day.
yeah, so when it came to the school situation when they were doing programming, yeah, it was daytime. It wasn't like nighttime. They would sit there and they would have the teacher was programmed. They had at this point I know that they had alters. At that point I didn't. She would just switch. It'd be like a
Okay.
trigger, like a hair trigger. When you anger somebody, they just flip a switch, but it was different. It was like a total different personality. Um,
So she didn't know what she was doing, like in another personality, right? So when she was your teacher,
no, yeah,
normally she wouldn't even know what she was doing, right? It wasn't like she
yeah,
was she was like covertly, teaching you it and at the same time thinking about, doing stuff with you later, but she was a completely different mode, right? Okay.
yeah,
So anyway, yeah, about the chronological order of the programs, I guess it's pointless to try to arrange that because it's time loops. You can be taken at any time to any time, right? To the future, to the past. So, we talked about before that you were taken to Camp Hero to Antarctica and then to Camp Hero from space from Nachtwaffen in 1970, right? So, and you could say that this was the order that you went, first Nachtwaffen, then Camp Hero, but again, it's not how it works. I mean, you could be taken from any time to any time.
I would assume I was around the age of 8 when they took me to Nachtwaffen specifically. But I know that I served 60 years in Nachtwaffen at
Mhm.
least. just as my altar Pindar. And I have several different altars that served in Nakwath at different levels. You know,
Okay.
some were in officer positions, some were in maintenance, some were, just soldiers, things like that. So it's not just one set altar for that faction. They have several they split off and that they utilize.
Can they intermingle together, working together? Or do
So
they have to
the
be like spread out so they don't see each other?
So from what I remember from different altars, like I do have one altar that served in another group, and there were altars from another group, from people that I recognize here that had come on board, that had been captured basically or taken on board. Their whole vessel it was a small craft, but like not really small, but it wasn't as large as the craft that took us. But when they were taken on board, finally got everybody else in the crew that were on the vessel out and back and into their vessel. At that point, there were a few that came off that ship that knew a different altar that I had, total different name. And when they saw my altar, when they saw my face, they freaked out because they thought I was the
Wow.
same guy, and they're like, "We can't kill this fucking guy." Because I remember them like saying that. And I remember, them like arguing amongst each other, being like, "I thought we killed this guy. How is he here?" Like. And then I remember like when I engaged conversation with them, it took them a while before they realized that I wasn't the same person. And then I had
Oh,
screen
okay.
memories. I had screen memories with that where like they try to implant screen memories of us, killing killing our evil twins, like the people that look like us with our faces, and
Doppelgangers. Yeah, yeah.
once we got rid of those, and there was someone to help me get rid of the screen memories. We worked together on figuring out what happened. And once I got rid of those screen memories and they stripped away, I realized what had actually been going on. Like once they realized that the only way to get on board this craft that was locked down was either to, breach it or to get on board willfully. So they started going in and manipulating the people's minds that had gotten off that ship. They had taken them in to like the medical area and started manipulating their minds to the point they thought that they were working for them, that what they
Oh,
were doing
okay.
was right until they were able to get on board. And it was like a double agent situation where they basically took the ship over from that point and forced everybody off the ship. And they came in with soldiers and everything. It was a crazy situation, and that was a different Nachtwalk vessel. But on that ship, I was just a maintenance person. And there's other people that remember me as a maintenance person there, and there's other people that remember the other altar and seeing that altar. Um,
Yeah.
but I don't
Wow.
remember ever seeing like me walking in and seeing an altar of mine. Like so if I had another altar, I don't remember them ever meeting. They kind of like how you were saying kept us separate from each other. But as they were doing this, like there's times where like if they were transferring your soul, your consciousness into one of the clones that they had be in the tank and stuff like that. Others have talked about it, but you would be in the tank and you would have a clone of yourself that was in another tank. And every clone that gets made has a baby soul in it, but
Hmm.
uh, they age increase the body, like they grow the body faster. So like you have a baby soul or a baby consciousness
Hmm.
inside of that body that can be pushed to the back versus when they bring over your consciousness into that one, because it's like the time that your consciousness, when your body dies, it's the electrodes that go out. We all have electrodes in our brains,
Yeah.
that function. So they're able to they've figured out a way technologically to transfer that,
Yeah.
you know.
Okay.
Um, and that's even been done even in the here and now where they transferred, a monkey brain to another monkey brain, in a different body.
Mhm.
They've already done it. It's just from what they released to the public, the monkey died, shortly after.
Right. Okay. So what you're saying is every clone has its own soul that is attached to it, a new, brand
Yes.
new soul, not your consciousness, but someone else, like a new incarnation, basically.
See, with that, I haven't gotten clarification personally. I don't
Okay.
know if it's like part of your consciousness or if it's a different one. It
Okay.
might be a different one. All I do know is they can still see what you're doing, when you're in that body. And normally with some of the tech that some of factions have, you only can do like a 20 and back because the soul starts to take over the body.
Oh, okay. But
You know,
not all. But
it
not
takes
all.
their body back. You
Got
know,
it. Yeah. But on all. Not all programs. Some programs can do more. Obviously, as you said, right?
yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's go back to Camp Hero here. Yeah. So, did you guys get age regressed while you were there because you were there for like 44 years?
Yeah, from what I remember is like before Jimmy had taken over that location,
Mhm.
you know, they kept us at a certain age, so I believe that they were age regressing us at certain points. Just like they had tech to actually regrow limbs and stuff for clone bodies,
Mhm.
at that base because of who they were dealing with for their technology. Um, but it's like so you had they would keep us at a certain age, normally our prime age. Like we grew up there, but once we hit a certain age, they try to keep us within that prime age.
I mean, if you were frozen, partially frozen in time, you would also be aging much slower there in inside the bubble, right?
Yes, you would be aging
Okay.
slower. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So 1985, around that time, you decided to get rid of the Draco at the base. Didn't you guys, weren't you afraid of, consequences and retaliation from them?
Basically, what had happened was is that Jimmy himself was trying to interact with Draco that were there on
Hmm.
the base, and they still wanted us to feed him. But it's like at that point we were just in like the beginning stages of taking control of the base fully. The Draco that were there already knew that. So they were caught in a situation where they wanted to take over the process themselves versus it falling into our hands, but they also wanted us just to feed them in general because that was part of the deal that was made. And at that point, we weren't able to get as much people as they were getting before we had taken over the base.
Okay.
So it's like the food supply for them was running lower, and it got to the point where we were trying. Jimmy himself was trying to make a deal with them to try to tell them, we only have what we have. Sorry, like he was very apologetic, like because these Draco are pretty, they were large and very combat oriented. They
Okay.
weren't weak, so it wasn't easy to take them on, especially if they were fully ready for a battle. When they were normally in the feeding room, they were normally as if you were in your own home, you know, dressed for the occasion versus dressed for a battle.
Okay.
At some point, there was some interaction. Realized that they were basically thinking about taking the base over, and when that occurred, Jimmy had gone in with others that he was serving with and entered willfully, knowing that he was going to have to possibly kill this group of Draco, which there was a good amount of in there eating. It looked like a more advanced cafeteria at that point, so they had already refurbished it. Um, it was I remember it being all white versus what it looked like before. But I just remember we walked in, Jimmy tried to talk to them. They had an interaction with the person that was in charge there. When they had that interaction, he basically told Jimmy he wasn't going to work with them. He wasn't going to do anything, that he needed to go and get more people. And that was that. He was going to feed them and keep up their end of the deal, a deal that he never made. So he was like, there's no way. So I just remember watching, like I have memories of watching Jimmy basically just turn around, and you know it's been discussed in other interviews what had occurred after that. One of the other individuals that served with me there, his alter's name was George, which was Matt Tracy.
Mhm.
Um, George ended up walking up and like he did what he did from what he said, and there was a bunch of other soldiers after Jimmy had walked out and grabbed um, I think he grabbed a rifle, and there was others that came in with larger artillery, and we just shot up the entire area because some of them were cloaked, and some weren't. Um, but basically we just laid bullets everywhere because we didn't know specifically what areas some of them were inside of that that location was
with machine guns, right?
there were, I think some of them had like, like the mini, almost like a mini Gatling gun.
Okay.
Um, so it's like some of them came in with those. Some of us just had rifles, um,
Hmm.
and we just shot everywhere in hopes that we could kill enough of them. Um, we didn't stop until they were all dead, and in that one room, and there were others on other levels taking out the ones that were there. We were trying to condense them in one area specifically as much as we could, which we were able to do that when that situation happened. That's why they also felt safe because they had numbers. Once they were gone, you know, whoever they were with originally, I think we're trying to figure out a way to get back onto the base
Hmm.
because most of the stuff we did is we tried to shut down any entrance and exits at that point just to make it to where the only way you were going to get in was through portal tech. And I know that at that time we had tech to just to stop them from being able to portal in,
Okay.
but there were still individual groups that were able to still get through, and it just wasn't easy for them to do it until they figured out how to get through working alongside the military.
I see. How big were they, their size, and did they have any weapons? Did they give any, retaliation when you started shooting?
So I remember them trying to fight with their bare hands. You know, they they're giant size. They're like 15 or 16 foot tall. Like they're really
Oh.
tall. They're not small beings by any means. So just imagine being a kid and being in front of them like they're giants to you.
Hmm.
Um, but once we were around about the age that we were, they were still taller than us, but you know, we were able to at least stand at a certain level where we weren't as afraid as we used to be. But if it was a one-on-one fight normally in hand to hand, you really can't, because
Right.
they have more strength than you do.
Of course.
And then their psychic abilities are just off the charts. It was a really hard situation just for them to do just what Jimmy and them did at the base was an extreme awkward situation because normally they can just go in your head, but most of the time it just depended. If you make groups of individuals or beings feel like they're empowered and
Yeah.
they get egotistical. It
Right.
doesn't matter what group you're dealing with.
Yes. Okay.
It's really hard to use psychic abilities while also maintaining combat at the same time. It's not easy,
Okay.
you know,
So
and
you'd
that's a lot of
you
what
you would have to be in a
they
certain mindset to actually, focus. Okay.
yeah, I mean for the human itself, yes,
Hmm.
but for the Draco, I think that they could pull it off, but it's still not easy because there's different ways you have to focus. But if they're digging into your mind, as long as it's just you and them, they can dig into your mind like it's nothing.
Okay. So,
And not just yours, but multiple people.
oh, all right. So after that, they were basically gone for the time, right? You say?
Yeah, so they had once that was around, say it would be 1985 in our time, right?
Hmm.
So by 2014, they had made a they had made a deal, and the group that I remember it was a mercenary Draco group that was coming back basically to take back over the base alongside an army group. Like it was an army group
Oh,
that
okay.
they were decked out in all black. Um, they were there on the top level of the base. Like once we were able to escape the base itself, um, it's like the Draco when they attacked, they came in, they killed a few of us, and once we had given up because there was too many of them that were coming through, because they had opened up quite a few portals and just started rushing soldiers through. Their warrior class
Wow.
soldiers. Um, the Draco that was in charge of that platoon, he basically allowed us to surrender.
Okay.
Under that surrender, he would allow us to leave with whoever we had, but we couldn't take anything but what we could carry, which was ourselves, basically. They didn't let us take weapons, nothing, you know? So they were like, you'll leave, and that's that. We won't
Wow.
kill you. But it was like the army at the time when they were at the top of the base, they were they were all cloaked. They were decked out in all black, but they were all cloaked. They had some kind of stealth tech, which they have that now, but it was like they had some stealth tech, and they were posted up. And their ordeal was they were supposed to force anybody that was trying to flee back towards them for them to kill us.
Mhm.
So I don't know if the Draco that was in charge, if he let them know, or if they were under the impression that they were just going to slaughter us wholesale. They
They were okay, so they were working with the army. You said you don't know which faction, obviously, right?
I don't. It
For
was
this
it
one.
was probably a compartmentalized group within the army. I don't know
Okay.
what it was, a specialized group. I know that for sure. When they decloaked because we were trying to leave, like towards leaving into Montauk itself,
Hmm.
um, they basically decloaked and they had rifles ready and we were unarmed. So yeah, we had abilities, but not all of us could use
So
telekinesis and
okay,
stuff like that.
so
So
they were posted on the outskirts of the base, waiting for you there, right?
yeah,
So they decloaked, they pointed an arm at you. So what happened then? Did you manage to leave?
they basically told us to turn around and go back. So
Go
we
back to
did what
Camp
they,
Hero?
yeah, go back to where we came from,
Okay.
basically, because they wanted us to go back, and we ended up leaving from that area, and we ended up fleeing towards a naval. There was a vacant naval base somewhere at Montauk Point. You could probably find it, but
Mhm.
they had a vacant naval base that we ended up coming across, and it took a while to get there. Um, and I do remember like the people that were there, like with Jimmy, like we started starving, like we were trying to, find food, hunt for food. We had to make like makeshift, uh, you know, stuff just to hunt food
Okay.
that was there, which
We
wasn't very
got
good.